Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a Monday, March 29th. The LA Galaxy get a victory over the New England Revolution in their first public preseason match of this 2021 offseason. We're going to talk a whole bunch about that game, tell you what we liked, what we didn't like, some of the pluses, some of the minuses, some of the names that stuck out, a bunch of stuff that we can sort of cover from that. And then we're also going to get you an update on all the international stuff that we need to update you on. There is a lot to talk about in terms of missing players, arriving players, injured players, so we're going to get you that as well as the team gets ready to head to Tucson at the end of this week. So a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. In order to help me do all that, he's back. The Panda himself, Mr. Kevin Baxter. Kevin, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, how come in that opening montage, all those songs about LA, how come Randy Newman, I Love LA, should be in there, don't you think?
Because that song kills the mood. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a mood killer. I mean, I Love LA is great, but it just doesn't fit into the, general overall grind of those initial songs. I mean, to be honest with you, we're not even doing it based on the best people to have ever made songs about LA either, because Randy Newman would be up there. We really did it for some sort of aesthetic that was years ago, and now we play it now, and people who haven't listened to us very long think that it's new. So, I mean, that was really my intention behind the whole thing.
We should dig into our vast budget and commission a song. Maybe U2 or somebody.
How much do you think? I would like to know how much you think it would cost for us to commission a song, because I've looked into this and I think that people have maybe a different view of what is reasonable or not expensive. That's my take.
You mean for someone to write it and then record it and then give it to you?
Yes. I
guess it would depend on the artist, but I don't know, 10,000?
10,000.
My ballpark? Not even close, huh?
I mean, I'm sure if we got somebody who might even make a name for themselves, 10,000 might it's probably more than that. It's probably in the 20,000s. If it was actually, let's say it was a freelancer who was doing stuff like that, I would imagine that it would cost anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000 just to get it sort of done. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in all that. So I'm sure people are like, hey, I'll do it for $5,000 and I'm going to get emails now. We'll see how that goes. I've
heard you at karaoke. I think you could pull it off.
I don't think the Spice Girls. I don't think my rendition of any of the Spice Girls songs is really going to help us out here, Kevin. So I'll keep that. I'll keep that going. Let's talk about the LA Galaxy though. We finally got to see them play, which is something that hasn't happened so far. It was, at least for the time being, an interesting way to sort of start. They played how many games? I mean, official, unofficial games. What we know is the LA Galaxy are undefeated in quotation marks, right? That's what we're going to call it.
Yeah, we really don't know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. So undefeated. They haven't lost in the preseason. But when we look at that and we say, okay, let's sort of see where the Galaxy are and how that is. It's still something that Greg Vanney has so far. I mean, outside of the game against LAFC, where they played apparently to a 4-4 draw, and we don't know any of the lineups or who sort of started, and we have an idea that maybe Augie Williams scored twice and Chicharito scored once, in that they haven't really allowed a whole bunch of goals. And even against New England, who had, I think, 25 shots to the LA Galaxy's, I think, 9. They didn't allow them to score, even though there were some offside calls that went the Galaxy's favor and a whole bunch of stuff like that. I mean, we have to feel like that the LA Galaxy, at least in the brief amount of time that we've seen them, have at least made some improvements, maybe? I mean, is that something that feels like it's stretching it too?
Well, yeah, what I find interesting is that aside from the LAFC game, the Galaxy are undefeated against former Galaxy legends, Landon Donovan and Bruce Arena. Those are the only people they played. I thought the game with New England was, I know a lot of starters are missing. We're going to talk about that. I think you said you counted four likely starters.
Yeah, 4 likely starters started the game.
So that would be Bond, Steres, Villafana,
and Chicharito. So,
and Chicharito.
Yeah.
Watching that game, knowing the starters were out, I just kind of had a feeling that these may be the kind of games we see, especially at the beginning of the season. 1-0 games, games that Bond is and some help in the back line, but certainly Jonathan Bond is going to be the key guy. And there's going to be a lot of 1-0, maybe 2-1 games. I just don't think the Galaxy are going to light it up and score 5 or 6 goals a game, but I don't think we're going to see any of those 6 goals conceded like we did a couple of times last season.
Yeah, it was an interesting lineup for the LA Galaxy. Let's say that. So you had Bond, who started at the back. You had Jalen Neal, who played at right back, who is a center back, by the way. And so Greg Vanney was asked about Jalen Neal afterwards, and he said, "Yeah, he's right back by necessity. It's what we needed to sort of have happen. Is we needed somebody to be there, and that's the person that we got." So Jalen Neal was at right back. You had Dan Steres starting at center back. You had Nick DePuy starting next to Steres, and with the injuries to People Gonzalez and with the current sort of rehab situation of Derek Williams, where Vanney said that it looked like Williams was possibly getting ready to come back and start training with the LA Galaxy. So, that we expect is sort of going to change between Steres, DePuy, People Gonzalez with the bone bruise. And by the way, can I just say, Kevin, that I heard that the People Gonzalez injury was much worse than sort of the bone bruise that Greg Vanney put out there was. But at the same time, I'm currently leaning in the Greg Vanney position about that, but let's just say that it's a bone bruise.
The Williams injury, he had surgery on a hamstring.
Oh yeah, Derek. Well,
that's pretty serious.
They reattached his hamstring. It was not attached to his leg anymore. They had to reattach it. So, no, for me, it's not necessarily with Williams. It seems like everybody's taking the approach that he's going to be fine, he's going to come back, and that he'll be okay. Kevin, that's what it feels like. Everybody's taking that. We don't know that, but he seems to be rehabbing, and basically he should be back in training with the team. That's what Greg Vanney told us here shortly. So you have that, but I mean, People Gonzalez has an injury. You have Derek Williams rehabbing. You have O'Neal Fisher, who apparently is doing some precautionary rehab, Kevin, which is, hey, we saw something, I think, on a hamstring, and maybe we don't want to do it. So he's not in this game as well. So, I mean, when you look at the team sheet, and I laughed because whenever I was sitting at the stadium, I looked, and the LA Galaxy had, I think, 18 or 19 players on there, and then New England had 25 players who were listed on their roster. And when you look down on the field between the two teams that were warming up, Kevin, you could see that New England had like a bazillion more players than the LA Galaxy. It ended up being like only a difference of maybe 4 players, but it felt like they had more players than the LA Galaxy.
Well, and I know we're going to talk about this later. I guess it's kind of you set me up. It's kind of a good segue to talk about it now. I just get the feeling that Greg Vanney and Dennis DeClosa, they are building this. This is a project. They're building this team. We've talked about this before. But when you look at the players they signed, Williams had to have his hamstring reattached. Either you say the Galaxy didn't know that, they didn't do their due diligence, or they knew that and they were okay with it. I think they knew that. They were okay with it.
They definitely knew that. Everybody knew what happened with him, yes.
Yeah, and O'Neal Fisher, he's rehabbing an injury, and they were okay with that when they signed him.
Precautionary. They scanned him whenever he came in, according to Greg Vanney, and they found some things that they didn't like, and so they were sort of like, hey, let's just take care of this now and have you rest and do some rehab and do some strengthening so that way you're going to be okay because we don't want to have any issues. That was the official word from Vanney.
Right, and my point is these guys were not ready to go out of the box. This wasn't like open up your present on Christmas Day and you can play with it. It's a bit some installation, some assembly was required.
Yep.
And then Vanney keeps talking about we're going to sign 4 or 5 more players. I did a little bit of math on this, and I figured with the injuries and the guys he wants to bring in, I don't think the Galaxy are going to have their top starting 11 maybe until the end of May. And we don't even know the Pavone situation. It could be the end of May, and then international games start in June or July, and they're going to lose 3 to 4 starters.
Right.
So this feels to me like this is something that they're definitely building very deliberately, and Vanney used that term very deliberately as they go forward. the Galaxy may get to the playoffs this year. They may have a very good team, but I just have the feeling that Greg Vanney and Dennis Close are looking a year or 2 years down the road. And that's why they're not panicking about guys aren't here. Grant Sear and Victor Vasquez aren't even going to join the team until next weekend in Arizona.
Right.
So, and that's 2 weeks before the season opener. So I just don't feel a lot of concern about this thing not being ready, because I don't think their plan starts on the first game of this season. I think it starts a little further down the road.
Well, Vanney was also pointing to the fact that some of the guys who are coming back from international duty, we'll talk about it, aren't going to be back with the team until Friday as well. And probably they come back, they have to quarantine, they have to do all the stuff they're doing. Araujo, all of them, they're coming from overseas. They're coming from outside of the United States. So they're going to have to come in and quarantine, and they're going to have to sit, and they're going to have to wait until they're quarantined out and they've tested out and they're able to join the team. So, Tucson, and again, there's a game on Saturday in Tucson. That's what's next with this. So I agree. I mean, you're not seeing it put together right now. I do think that with Grand Sear, I guess we're saying Grand Sear. You have to say it with a French accent.
Samuel.
Yeah. So Sam, as Vanney calls him, Sam Grand Sear is going to be coming back, and apparently Vanney so far has said he's not worried about either Vasquez or Grand Sear in terms of their fitness, because they've been training with teams and they're up to date and they're doing it, but. There's a real argument there about whether or not those guys are match fit. And they're probably not, and they're going to have to quickly do it. And so, to say that we're only a couple weeks away, as you said, April starts, this week. So you're only 18 days away once April starts from everything kicking off.
And Vanney knows Victor Vasquez better than anybody, and he said repeatedly that he thinks he's going to be match fit. Here's why I don't think he will be. He's played 14 minutes in the last year or so. He's 35 years old, 34, 35, I think. You look at what happened with the Olympic qualifying team. They were in Mexico. These guys are all by definition under 23. They were in Mexico for 3 weeks, I think, training. And yet all we heard from Jason Kreis is these guys are not match fit. We've got to rotate players out. And look at Honduras. They're all match fit because they're into their season. If 23-year-old guys can't get match fit in 3 weeks after having just come off their season, I don't know how a 35-year-old guy gets fit in 2 weeks when he hasn't played in a year.
Yeah.
So,
No.
Maybe it's the way Vanney uses it. Maybe Vanney thinks match fit is he can go the last 15 minutes, and that's all we want him to do. I don't know.
Yeah. And his role, as Greg has talked about him, seems to be a lot bigger than maybe as we initially expected him to as well. So, all of those things are sort of a mix of yes or no. I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen Sam Grand Sear play, in person. So we don't know what he looks like. But when you look at this lineup that goes through here, I mean, Bond there, Steres, Villafana, and Chicharito subbing in sort of as, and I think a reasonable backup is Nick DePuy at center back. I think that Sasha Kljestan is a reasonable backup as probably somebody who comes off the bench fairly early in the second half, or starts the game and comes off at halftime. Sasha Kljestan in the midfield, that probably makes sense. Adam Saldaña is playing himself into that backup role, and Greg Vanney has been very impressed. Ethan Zubak for me is a guy who's going to get loaned down to Galaxy 2 because I'm really expecting Augie Williams, and maybe it's just a matter of how much space is left on the roster and everything else, but it certainly feels like Augie Williams, who's got a little run out towards the end of the game, but a run out in his preferred position, Kevin, instead of Ethan Zubak, who's basically playing a right winger Ethan Zubak. Again, that's probably a position by necessity whenever you look at it, because the Galaxy don't have enough wingers in there to sort of fill that up, especially at the starting way. So you had Zubak in there, Johnny Perez, who ended up scoring the goal, Cameron Dunbar, played really well too. So
I thought he was excellent.
He was very good. I mean, between Perez, Dunbar, and Saldaña, you're talking about young kids making an impact. And Greg Vanney talked about all of them whenever he was in his post game. So I mean, that was what you got from that game. Is that you look at that, Kevin, and with only 4 starters that we consider starters, at least right now, and maybe Sasha Kljestan is borderline depending on how many people are actually available whenever you look at it. With only 4 starters, the LA Galaxy were able to be at least competitive with the young guys in tow there against New England, who played very much a more first team lineup than the LA Galaxy could have even dreamed of at that point. So I found the match the first 60 minutes, which is sort of where we delineate between the starters and then everybody started rotating out. The first 60 minutes of that game was entertaining. The LA Galaxy were competitive. I enjoyed watching it.
I thought Bond was really good, and he was very aggressive. Sometimes he came off his line a little bit too early and came off a little bit too far. He'll fix that. I thought he was excellent, and he seemed to be very communicative with his back line, talking a lot, directing traffic. I thought Chicharito was okay. I mean, I don't think he was great. I don't think he was poor. I think he was probably better than the Chicharito we saw most of last year. I was a little concerned Villafani came out awfully early. He doesn't seem to be match fit at all.
No, he's not. That was his first minutes of the preseason. We know that.
He had the groin injury. Yeah.
He was injured, and Greg Vanney said he was going to have some minutes. He did. He started. He went 30. And
But guess who came in for him?
Yeah, Danilo Acosta.
And we got to see him, and that was good too. A lot of people talking about how Cameron Dunbar looked great, and geez, where'd that come from? You know what? Cameron Dunbar looked really good last year at MLS is back.
Yep.
And he came on and had an impact on the game immediately, and then we never saw him again. Guillermo just never used him.
Correct.
And my understanding was he looked good in training all of last year too. And I don't know what Guillermo's problem with him was, but he just never got another chance to come into a game. I think he proved once again what we already knew, that he deserves some playing time, and hopefully Vanney will be a little more open, giving him some of that.
I mean, first of all, I think they're going to have to. I don't see the LA Galaxy having a starting left wing right now. And if you're going to put it in anybody's hands, I don't necessarily have an issue with giving it to a young kid like Cameron Dunbar if it allows you to play other guys in their positions, right? I mean, you look at what Dunbar was able to do in that game, and to me, it's very interesting because he was playing against, as we like to say, grown men in a professional league, and he was making some of them look silly. I mean, and that's, whenever you're looking for separation or the ability to be comfortable in that, you saw Dunbar doing stuff that he wants to do, and by doing that stuff, creating space and creating options. For me, the biggest part that he needs to improve is his finishing and his crossing, because he has the moves, he has the speed, he knows where to be. So all of those things are sort of checking off as you go down the field for me on Cameron Dunbar. And I'm like, yes, yes, and yes. And then you get to the final third, and he's finding himself in open spots where he can either get an open cross or he can take an open shot. And that's not there yet. So for me, that's the only thing that I really want to see improved. And if you're talking about a team that doesn't have a starting left winger, now, we can move things around, right, Kevin? Because you and I have talked about maybe you move Sebastian Lletget over to the right side, and he plays on that right wing side, and you move Grandsir over to the left side, and he'll play on the left side. So there's ways to get experience and the better players on the field, but that might mean moving Sebastian Lletget out of the role that you wanted them to play, which is in the center of the field and sort of playing underneath Chicharito, the position that he sort of plays for the U.S. men's national team under Greg Berhalter as well. So whenever I look at changing things, you always have to look at, if you're going to start moving people around, is how many people can you put in their best positions? And Cameron Dunbar allows you to put a lot of people in their best positions, and you're not necessarily, again, limited time. We've seen him play twice in quote-unquote competitive games. MLS is back, and then this preseason game. We've seen that, and he's a good player. So I think he's impressing enough that Greg Vanney is hinting at the fact that he may get more minutes. Same with Adam Saldaña, who looks very, very comfortable on a field with grown men. The same with Johnny Perez. And Vanney says, I think he's scored in like every game that we've had this year, right? And I have no idea how many goals Johnny Perez scores. We actually asked Kevin, for Johnny Perez after the game, and apparently he's shy. He's very, very shy. So we're gonna work on that with him, because if he keeps playing the way that he does, people are gonna want to talk to him and want to know his name. It's time for the boy to grow up a little bit here, and hopefully fans will start hearing from him, because I think he's a really fun player to watch as well.
Your description of Cameron Dunbar I thought was spot on, and it reminded me of how much he reminds me of Uriel Antuna when he was with the Galaxy, in the fact that he is a winger, that his speed changes games, that he is really good up until the final third. Teams have to take account of him a little bit like Ima Boateng, but I think both Dunbar and Antuna are better players. But I thought the thing that Antuna had with the Galaxy is once he got into the final third with the ball, he didn't know what to do with it. That's where things kind of fell apart. He made teams pay attention to him going up the field. They had to account for his speed. He'd blow by people and get in good positions, and then he wouldn't be able to do anything with it. Dunbar's a little bit like that. He needs to fix that final third. But having said that about Antuna, what was he here 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I saw him play a couple of times for Mexico in the Olympic qualifying tournament. He's fixed that. He still has the speed. He still has the game-changing ability. He still has the ability to blow by defenders. But now he scored 3 goals in that tournament, one against the U.S. He scored another in the final, their final game against Canada. He's a much better offensive player, much better threat now in the final third. He figured out that missing piece. I'd like to think Dunbar is going to follow that sort of map. This year he's going to be a dangerous guy who kind of maybe loses control in the final third. He'll figure it out. I think he's going to be a really good player going forward. What is he, 17, 18?
18, I think, yeah.
It's got a little time.
Yeah, he has time to do it, and he looks like he's developing. I like the comparison to early Antuna. I'll say that with Antuna, I think Dunbar's a smarter player, just in the positions that he puts himself in. I think Uriel is a very good player, but he relies on his speed a lot to get him in those positions. I think Dunbar positions himself well and then uses his speed to separate. So a little bit of a difference in terms of how I would view those players. But I like Cameron Dunbar. I don't know, for me, it begs the question of whether or not he spends time with LA Galaxy 2 at all this year, or if he just stays up on the senior team like he did last year. And mostly that was because they couldn't swap between the teams as much because they were because of all the quarantine rules and the different issues. So that was one of the things. I really like Cameron Dunbar. I thought that was really good. You talked about Chicharito in terms of, I thought he was hardworking, quick, decisive, and making all the right runs. And Greg Vanney said after the game, he said that he was extremely happy with his performance. And if you look at the goal that was scored by Chicharito as well, it really is about, the hustle and about keeping moving and about trying to find spaces and small runs and little things that you can do to throw your opponent off. And, so all of those things sort of come in to play with Chicharito. And the big thing that I took away from what Vanney said, and it's certainly a different view than maybe I would have of things, is that he said Chicharito's making all the right runs. We're not finding him. Right. And he goes, and it's not about finding him on the first run. It's about finding him on those second and third runs. And he goes, and quite honestly, we probably need more experience on the field in order to be able to pick out those runs, Kevin. So, I mean, I thought that was a super interesting take on it. Now, whether he's covering for a star player that he is trying to build up and trying to get confidence in and all those things, I will say this. The work rate that he put in roughly his 60 minutes before he got pulled off, was not a work rate we saw from him at all last year. Dropping deep to receive the ball, trying to build offense, trying to be a pressure relief valve, finding runs in different pockets. He was making late runs into the box that I thought were extremely dangerous. And if the Galaxy had found him, I think that they do have some better things. So for me, when you're looking at, Chicharito and what he's bringing, and again, we get a very small, limited, little tiny itsy bitsy view of it in this game, is that he seems to be doing all the right things. And that's what you can take away from this, right? Is that he doesn't look out of shape. He looks like he's in shape. He looks like he's motivated. I did see him hang his head once or twice whenever a pass didn't come his way, and so he was frustrated. I think he wanted to score in that game, and I like that type of frustration. But for me, Chicharito's doing all the right things that you would expect him to do. And he's even out there like coaching kids. He's talking to Adam Saldaña, or he's talking to Johnny Perez. He's like, he gives him a high five. He's like, pats him on the butt. He's like, let's go. Let's get back into this. This is what it's all about. So, if you're looking for the night and day difference between those, I think it's there right now in terms of just his attitude on the field that you're seeing. And I understand it's preseason. I understand that that's sugarcoating a lot of problems that he had last year. But he is at least playing the part, Kevin, and I think that's an important first step.
Well, you were at the stadium, so you didn't hear the broadcast. I watched from home, so I heard Kobe talk before the game about the difference between Chicharito and Zlatan. And we've talked about this before. Sebastian mentioned it. With Zlatan, you just push the ball forward. Zlatan finds it, whether it's in the air or on the ground, wherever it is. He finds it. He scores. Chicharito is a much different player. The ball has to come in low. He doesn't play well in the air. The ball has to come in low. Chicharito's runs are well timed. He's a much more. He's not as what's the way? I'm trying to think of a way to describe it, and I can't. But his runs are much more short and defined. He doesn't go throughout the box. You have to catch him where he is.
Right.
He doesn't chase the ball like Zlatan does. That's a different kind of player. And then last year we had the quarantine thing where they actually the team didn't train together for about 3 months, so there was no training at all. Then when they came back, Chicharito got hurt. My point is, there was a long time last season when Chicharito was not on the training field or in a game with his teammates. They haven't figured that out yet. I don't think they've figured out that sometimes Chicharito fakes a run. Sometimes it's the second run. You have to wait for that.
Right.
That's why you see passes go behind Chicharito all the time. You see Chicharito doesn't make the run when someone thinks he's going to. That's going to take some time to figure out. And I think it's starting to come a little bit now. Guys that were there last year, Zubek, certainly Leggett, Sasha Kleshtin, Dunbar trained with him a little bit last year. I think that is starting to come. But Chicharito is a much more nuanced player than Zlatan was. We've seen that everywhere he's gone. It takes a little while for him to sort of catch on. I think maybe we saw some of that in this game.
Well,
by the way, how was the press box? I understand you guys had little partitions and things.
No, we were
okay.
So this was the first time we've been back in the press box, and I figured that we would soon because they're expecting fans at the game, and we're probably not going to sit in the same spot that we were if there's going to be fans, because it's hard to keep a separation between everybody and do that stuff. So I understand that. So we were up in the press box, and our press box is open air. So I'm not, there's not necessarily anywhere you have to walk through the inside in order to get to the open air part, but everybody hung out outside. They just thinned out the herd a lot. There's not a whole bunch of seats up there. We're jammed in there like sardines. And I think right now, and I don't know if they're going to open up the roofs or not, because in MLS Cups before we've sat out on the roofs, or I've sat out on the roofs because I'm not a bigwig and don't get to sit inside the press box area sometimes. But I wouldn't be surprised if they open up the roofs to create more outdoor, more open air seating for the press that is likely to show up. So it was just thinned out. It was great. It was fine. No problems. No issues. It was a wonderful night. It was cool because they didn't have that stupid soundtrack playing, so we could hear everybody yelling at each other. So when you talked about Jonathan Bond, one of my big takeaways was that he is loud and in charge there, because you could hear him every time. And there is a communication, and maybe it's just because we don't get to hear it all the time, right? Because there's a soundtrack playing or there's fans or whatever it is. But there's a communication between him and the back line that was happening constantly. And there was one play in particular, the ball got sort of cleared up a little bit, and everybody, I swear I heard 5 players all shout up, and it was all the defenders, and it was Jonathan Bond yelling up, and the entire defense moved as one wall forward, and they all took the step at the same time. And it's like, that has been missing, because so often we saw the defense be disconnected. And with 2 starters, or 3 if you count Bond in there at goalkeeper as well, but with basically missing 2 other guys that are going to be starters, even guys they plugged in, Jalen Neal and Nick DePuy. With that happening, those starters, they seem connected, and they seem to have a plan, and they seem to have an understanding. And that goes for transfers out of the defense into the rest of the team too, Kevin, because when you watch the LA Galaxy play, it was very clear to me and other people. I was sitting next to Damian Calhoun. Other people in the press box were saying the Galaxy have a plan. And we were like, so it looks like a team, and we were joking around a little bit, but it's like the Galaxy haven't had a plan since 2015 or 2016, whenever Bruce Arena left. And now it looks like they're executing a plan and working on a plan. And it seems Greg Vanney, even in the limited number of starters that were out there, has a system in place, and they were trying to play that system because it looked like they were on the same page.
Well, yeah, Bond, you can even hear on TV, was totally in control and very communicative. Yeah, as you said, yelling out, really telling his defenders what he wanted them to do, and that's really important. The goalie needs to direct traffic. He's kind of the quarterback in a sense. He's the one that's facing the field the whole time, and so I thought that was good. You talked a little bit about the fans coming back, and remember, Galaxy's home opener isn't until the last week in April. I really think we're going to be in the orange tier by then. I really think we're going to have 20%.
Well, that's the 33% is the orange one, isn't it?
Excuse me, 33. Yeah, 33%. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to be there. I mean, I know that there is a spike coming There's a number of states, including Washington State, that have the whole upper Midwest. They've all seen numbers climbing, COVID numbers climbing. California is still in decline. We're still seeing our numbers go down, and the vaccinations are really increasing. In fact, knock on wood, I get mine on Wednesday, my first Moderna dose. I'm looking forward to that. So I think things are looking pretty good here. I think we're going to be at 8,300 fans by the opener.
Yeah, I would even push that into the 88. I think we're going to use that 26,674 for the attendance. So I'm saying 88, which is a 3,500 fan increase from the red tier. So the Galaxy mentioned, Kevin, that they were going to sort of phase this into tiers, which is there's going to be a tier, which is basically, or a wave, I should say, a wave of ticket buying. So they're going to get certain number of people into the stadium, like up to that red tier, which is, the 5,300, I think 5,335 in the red tier. They're going to sell enough tickets to cover that wave. And then if it goes to orange, they're going to open up a second wave. And if for some reason it would drop back down to red, those orange people wouldn't get to go, but the red people still would. So you'd want to be in sort of the red wave and not the orange wave. Does that make sense?
That does. And by the way, I talked to a couple of epidemiologists and doctors for another story I'm doing, and they all caution, look, just because it says you can go doesn't mean you must go, or even you should go.
Right.
If you are concerned, if you haven't had the vaccine, for example, if you're concerned, if you've got a cough, if you're uncomfortable in crowds, it's okay. The game's going to go on all the way through October. The Galaxy will be here. Maybe wait until you're a little more comfortable, go later. Just because you can go doesn't mean you have to go, or that you even should go. So the games will be on TV. Wait till you feel comfortable coming back. The last thing we want to do is get somebody sick at a soccer game. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Again, there were a lot more people there, Kevin. A lot more people whenever you look at it. Back in the stadium on Saturday night, just in terms of...
But fans weren't there.
No fans, but in terms of people, right? In terms of support staff and everything else, I feel like there was a lot more people there than there have been in sort of some of the previous games. And I think it's because they're getting it up. The funny thing was in this game, Kevin, we had VAR. Right, which we were cracking up in the press box because we're like, what are they waiting for? Either they called it offside. Why are we? And they're like, well, there's VAR. We're like, why? There's VAR at a preseason game? And it was the referees were getting their preseason on as well. And so we had VAR at the preseason game. I don't know if we'll have VAR Wednesday night because Spectrum isn't broadcasting it. And you would expect that Spectrum is the reason that they were able to have VAR, and it might even be the reason that VAR showed up was because Spectrum had that and they had their cameras available. I don't know that there will be the same number of cameras available for the LAGalaxy.com broadcast coming on Wednesday night, but it is being run by MLS. It is at an MLS stadium, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's VAR again on Wednesday night. So,
isn't that Galaxy.com? Isn't that somebody on their cell phone just recording their game?
Yeah, it was. I had the spot closest to the center line, right? All the way on the far left in the front seat of the press box, which most people were like, I don't care, but that's closest to the center line. And I had I had a camera with me because I was going to do post game stuff. And if you go on cornerthegalaxy.com or if you go to YouTube on our YouTube station, you can see I did a short little 2-3 minute game report from the stadium. The stadium's behind me there, but basically I had it going, and I'm like, if I could just stream this, you could have a game. You could, it would be like ants on parade, but you could see it, and at least there would be something there. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, reminder, all remaining LA Galaxy preseason games are on LAGalaxy.com, which has the 90-mile radius as prescribed by Major League Soccer. So I was told, by the way, Kevin, that Spectrum Sportsnet, because we were talking about areas, I think it was last Monday, areas that are within the Spectrum coverage but won't be able to watch this game because they're outside of the 90 miles, right? And so we talked about Las Vegas, we talked about San Diego. There was one that I missed, and so one of our listeners who was from there said, hey, what about us? You missed us. And that is all of our listeners in Hawaii, who also get Spectrum, and so therefore usually get the Galaxy games. They will not be able to watch it as well because I'm pretty sure Hawaii is further than 90 miles away from the coast of Los Angeles there.
And remember, that 90-mile radius is from Dignity Health Sports Park.
Yes.
So even though the Galaxy are playing in Tucson,
yes,
which is more than 90 miles away,
yes,
you have to be within 90 miles of Dignity Health Sports Park to get that.
Yeah, I'm not going to say use a VPN, but Use a VPN.
If you do, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just there.
You're not saying not to use it.
I'm just, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. That somebody would like to say that was, a borderline illegal thing. Tell me where it says it's illegal. So it's like, well, lying about your location is the part of that gets you in trouble with that. So, but yeah, there's going to be ways. I don't know what the coverage is going to be like in terms of if they're going to run just a standard, if Joe and Kobe are going to do the LAGalaxy.com games. I haven't been told of any of that. I don't know if everybody saw on Spectrum either, but Nikki Kay is the new sideline reporter for the Spectrum Sportsnet. So if you watched any of the Spectrum broadcasts, you got introduced back to her. She's been a sports reporter on the Spectrum News station on Spectrum, which, Kevin, you pop up on every once in a while because the LA Times has their LA Times show, and then I turn my TV on, and then you're there, and I turn the channel real fast.
Yeah, that broadcast won an Emmy last year. Not
for you. Yes.
Despite me, they won an Emmy. But for people that have Spectrum, that actually gets really good ratings. And the reason is because when you turn on the TV, a lot of times that's the first thing that pops up. That's the deal we have to have for this corner of the galaxy, is just whenever you turn your TVs on, there we are. And I imagine our numbers would go up. But yeah. Or TV viewership would drop altogether.
They would just turn it off. They would cut the cord immediately. That's for sure. Anyway, so that's it. I'm trying to think of anything else from the game. I mean, the Galaxy got bossed around for some of this, and I don't want to act like there were no problems with the Galaxy. They were. Greg Vanney specifically pointed out losing balls by playing them backwards and how that is detrimental to the idea of playing out of the back. And if we saw what the LA Galaxy want to do is, Kevin, they want to play out of the back. What we know is going to happen is that when you play out of the back, that you're going to make mistakes every once in a while, and those mistakes could cost you goals. In fact, most of the time they do. The US U23s can talk to you about playing out of the back and making mistakes. That certainly can happen. And you saw some of that in this. So understand that as the Galaxy get comfortable with this, you're going to see some of those, howling mistakes that nobody ever wants to see, but those are going to happen. And I think we saw some of that, on Saturday night.
Well, I think the back passes, that's just when you're recycling and try to, get everyone back on the same page and sort of start again. I remember during when they had the Copa America Centenario here, I remember watching Argentina play against the U.S. Man, they did that all the time. If they were going forward, even if they got to the midfield stripe and they didn't like what they saw in the U.S. defense, they'd turn it around, send it back to the goalkeeper, and just start everything all over again. I'm not sure. I mean, you have to have, obviously, very quality players and a quality goalkeeper to do that. But you do see a lot of teams doing that. One thing that struck me, though, about Bond and about what you're talking about, this was an inconsequential play. Nobody will remember except me. But about 20 minutes in, there was one of those plays where a defender turned around and sent the ball back to Bond. And Bond sent it forward. It was a sharp right-footed pass. It was on the ground. It was about 20 yards. What I remember is it went right between two defenders, or New England players, rather, to a Galaxy defender. Bond had the confidence to send a 20-yard pass through the defense to his guy to start the build-up out of the back. You just don't see goalkeepers do that. They almost always find an outlet pass to a guy who's by himself or maybe has one guy around him. But that was like a pass that a midfielder would make to launch a forward into the box or something. Obviously, he's a really good passer and has a lot of confidence in it, in his ability to do that. That's something that I don't think we've seen from a goalkeeper in a while.
Can I say something that Greg Vanney hasn't said? And that is that Jonathan Bond is the number one goalkeeper for the LA Galaxy, because he's not going to say it until later, but he's playing him like he's the number one goalkeeper for the LA Galaxy. Jonathan Klinsmann came in, got some minutes in that second half. I think that right around 60, 70 minutes right in there, so that Klinsmann could then, switch run out the rest of the time on that. And it's good to see he's back from his concussion, so that's all good. But he's the number two. It's Jonathan Bond is the number one, and I thought he was going to be when they brought him in, just because it seemed that way, just in terms of how Jonathan Bond was talking, how Greg Vanney was talking, all these things. Then you have Jonathan Bond in a press conference, or excuse me, a media call. I don't want to screw up the things that I say and then not be right about it. But in a media call, being as calm and as confident as you would expect somebody sort of in that number one position. He's walking the walk, Kev. He's talking the talk. He has that swagger. He says it's not about the competition because he knows that he's the number one goalkeeper. In my mind, that's been decided.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he had offers from at least two other MLS teams. I think it was New York City, or maybe it was the Red Bulls in Miami. They talked to him. He went to the Galaxy. He came all the way from England. He signed a 4-year deal. You don't do any of that stuff unless you have at least a wink and a nod that you're the guy. Now, if he comes here and is terrible, then
Right.
all bets are off. But I think they probably told him, look, if you can walk and talk and drink water at the same time, then you got the job. He wouldn't have come that far if he didn't. But what do you think, with this compacted schedule? We went over that there's a number of times when they have 3 games in a week.
Right.
There's going to be travel this year, not large travel, but there is travel. There's no U.S. Open Cup that probably the Galaxy won't be. We don't know that for sure. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the U.S. Open Cup is not there. But still, it's a compacted schedule. A lot of times you see goalkeepers play 32, 34 games. They play the entire schedule. You think that'll happen? Or do you think with that schedule, do you think that Klinsmann's going to get a couple starts?
No. I think Jonathan Bond starts unless he has something happen to him, and then Jonathan Klinsmann will come in. It doesn't feel like, maybe if there's some throwaway games, but goalkeepers don't get tired. All right. Sorry. That's why they play until they're, 45 years old and, they can still run around and dive. As long as they can get up quickly and still move and do that, it's a different timing schedule for a goalkeeper. You want to have a long life in soccer, be a goalkeeper. You also have to be crazy, so that helps too. But for me, Jonathan Bond isn't going to be one of those guys who rotates. The center backs for me, I don't know that they're going to rotate unless they get, unless they get tired. You look at some of the other, those might be the only positions where you sort of sit there and say they're not going to rotate, because I feel like everybody else is going to rotate. One, because maybe they're going to have to, Kevin, or two, maybe because, that they're going to be tired. Outside backs, especially in most of the modern formations, are basically midfielders who run back and forth and do all that. All the midfielders run back and forth and put a ton of miles on their legs. Chicharito might be a guy who, if he stays healthy, plays 34 games. I don't think you rest him for anything unless he has a knock or something like that. And in his position, he's going to get tired, but he's also a designated player who's playing a striker position. I think he plays and plays until he can't play anymore. So
who are your 2 starting center backs? You mentioned your 2 starting center
I think
backs.
it's going to be Williams. I think it's going to end up being Williams and Steris. Those are my arguments. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me on that. Let me put that back. There's tons of people who disagree with me on that. Okay, but I'm going to end up being right on it. That's my guess.
That's a pretty ballsy call right there.
Really? You think it is?
Yeah.
I think it's obvious, but that's and then I'm going to be wrong and be like, oh, remember I said the LA Galaxy weren't going to sign another center back. I said they had enough. They're done. They're not going to do it.
Alan Franco.
And yeah, Alan Franco went to Atlanta. You were right, Kevin. Somebody did finally sign him, by the way. So
Yeah, it wasn't the right team though.
Over a year ago, you were like, he's coming. Here he comes.
Yeah,
So,
I still stand by that though. If the pandemic hadn't blown everything up, I think he would have come.
I think that was probably in the cards too. But yeah, the pandemic did blow things up and certainly changed some things around. All right. Is there anything else from the scrimmage that you absolutely take away from it? I'm trying to think. I was entertained, and I'm not often entertained by some of the poor Galaxy teams that have played. I got to watch live soccer. I got to do it with some funny people around me in the press box. It was a nice night, and I imagine that everybody can't wait to get back to the stadium. I'm here to tell you that the stadium is there. It's still beautiful. It's still as you remember it, and it's waiting for you. So whenever you feel comfortable, you should get back there and do that. And yeah, get your vaccine, and that makes that decision hopefully easier for a lot of you as well. So I'm glad that people are sort of getting back and doing that. It's going to be.
But
fun,
remember,
Kevin.
the vaccine. You've had your vaccine, right?
I've had one. I've had my first one. Yeah.
That doesn't mean you get to stop wearing the mask. You still got to wear the mask.
I wear my mask. I basically took it off right now, but even when my wife was around, I don't like her that much, so I just put the mask on. So it's fine. Let's get a little bit more into some of the other news that's traipsing around the LA Galaxy, and looking at Sebastian Lletget and Jonathan Dos Santos, Efrain Alvarez, Julian Araujo, all away on international duty. We can sort of start. Let's start with Sebastian Lletget. We talked about him playing in the USA's 4-1 victory over Jamaica, and then they also had a 2-1 win over Northern Ireland, where Sebastian Lletget came in, I think, at halftime and played the last 45 minutes. And Greg Berhalter basically said, hey, the reason we're doing that is because that was the first time he's played 90 minutes this year, and Sebastian Lletget mentioned that as well. So they were working him back into fitness, but that's a positive for the LA Galaxy that Sebastian Lletget has put those types of minutes on his legs in that sort of environment.
Yeah, I talked to him after the first game where he got his first international brace. He had at that point 4 goals in his last 4 games. He led the team in minutes over the last year and a half. You go back to the start of 2020 through where we are now in 2021. He's played more minutes and started more games than any U.S. national team player. Like I said, he got the brace. Then he came back and played 45 minutes the next game. I don't know that any other player in his, he's in preseason.
Right.
I think he probably worked harder and is more exhausted than any other player on the team. The thing with Sebastian is look at that team. I mean, look at the midfielders, Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie. I think Pulisic is playing at a forward, but I still think he's thought of mainly as a midfielder. There's a lot of these. That midfield is deep. Brendan Aronson, but Sebastian Lletget, when you look at that roster, his age, he's not on a major European team. He's the one guy that you think of, maybe he doesn't belong, maybe he's holding someone's place. You know what? I don't think he is anymore. For whatever reason, Berhalter gave him a shot, and he seized the opportunity. I think he is really making a case that he is the first choice Nations League and World Cup qualifying. He's the first choice starter in the midfield.
It's really interesting. I feel like he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. He hasn't said that, but it feels that way, that he's out to prove something. And you've seen him with the U.S. men's national team play very well. And if Greg Vanney was speaking, sort of correctly, or his view hasn't changed, he's going to come back and play that same role with the LA Galaxy. Not only does that help the LA Galaxy, but that helps the U.S. men's national team as well. You have a guy who doesn't have to think in terms of, I have to play a different position. He's just got to play with different players. And that is huge to be able to give a guy one job, and this is your job, go do your job. And that's sort of where Sebastian Lletget seems to be right now. That could pay such huge dividends for the LA Galaxy, who need him to be an impactful player on this team, because they are missing quality without him in that position. And Greg Vanney seems to be putting him in a position to play sort of more of a central attacking midfielder, Kevin, than maybe other coaches were ready to give him. But that's a false nine. You could call him a false nine in some of those. But I imagine that his combinations with Chicharito down the middle are going to be what really make the LA Galaxy a dangerous offensive team.
Yeah, with the national team too. He's a linker. He's the guy that links up to the front. It's done a great job with that. You're right. I mean, he moved around a lot, even in the Galaxy. From game to game, he would sometimes change positions, and then he went to the national team. And didn't really know what his job was. It's much clearer now what he's supposed to be doing. I'm just really impressed. I mean, again, with this star-studded team, you look at him, and again, he's the guy that just doesn't belong there, but yet try to get him out of the lineup or try to find someone that can do what he does. I really expect that he is now a mainstay of the national team through this next World Cup cycle.
Yeah, which means that the LA Galaxy should be prepared to lose him, because he's not going to be there for all their games. There's Nations League, there's World Cup qualifying, and then let's say he's not on the A team for some reason, Kevin, which I think we both agree he is. If he's on the B team, then there's Gold Cup as well. So that's sort of where Sebastian Lletget is. But in terms of the LA Galaxy, Sebastian Lletget should come into this team understanding where he has to play, understanding Greg Vanney's system, and being match fit and ready to go. So Sebastian Lletget, Greg Vanney said that all the guys who are returning, coming back from international duty, would meet the team in Arizona and then play those games in Arizona once they do that, because we talked about it. All those guys are coming from out of the country, and right now, I believe out of country quarantine is 14 days. That's not the 7 days with the negative test. So I'm sure there's some other MLS protocols and some different things that they're able to do, because technically maybe they were in a bubble, going in a bubble while they were there, and so perhaps there's some things to get around it. But right now, I know this because of my real job, we're trying to get somebody from the UK over to here, and they were like, well, we'd have to be quarantined for 2 weeks there, and then we have to be quarantined for 2 weeks whenever he came back. So that person would be quarantined for a month just in order to be here for like a week, and go back. So that wasn't exactly something that was working.
Another thing with Sebastian, before we get away from him, remember at the end of last season when they had the Galaxy had that last game in Portland, and they allowed Sebastian Lletget to go to Europe. Why? Because Greg Berhalter requested him to come play with that European-based team. With the Pulisic didn't play in those games, but with all of those European-based players, Sergio Aguerro and all those guys, they wanted Lletget. I believe he was the only MLS player to make that trip.
I think so. Yep.
And Berhalter said, I want to see him playing with these guys. I think that was the start of the sign that this is the guy that has a bright future with Greg Berhalter's team.
Yeah, very well could be. The other two guys up with senior national teams right now, Jonathan Dos Santos and Efrain Alvarez, both up with the senior Mexican national team. Jonathan Dos Santos did come in the second half of Mexico's 1-0 loss to Wales. I think they were playing in Cardiff, and he came in at about the 78th minute, so got some time in there towards the end. Efrain Alvarez was listed as a sub, but did not play in this game. And it's just interesting in terms of what Tata Martino is thinking, because it seems like he wanted to get Efrain some time in at least one of these games. And so far they play in one game, and Efrain Alvarez doesn't see the field at all. So they have another chance to do that, as Mexico will be playing against Costa Rica at the same stadium where the U.S. played their first game against Jamaica in Austria. And so that's the one to watch. And I believe that's on Tuesday. So we're recording on Monday night. So on Tuesday at 1 p.m., it'll be Mexico versus Costa Rica in Austria there. So perhaps Efrain Alvarez or Jonathan Dos Santos. Maybe Dos Santos gets the start, being he only played 12 minutes, but watch those two guys. But the bottom line is that whereas Julian Araujo and Sebastian Lletget are on their way back, Jonathan Dos Santos and Efrain Alvarez are not, because they have a game on Tuesday, and they're likely to start heading back, on Wednesday whenever they're done with that, or if they can right after the game. But I don't think they're going to any flights sort of that late in European time. They'll probably wait till the next morning and start heading back. So that's sort of an interesting thing. But in terms of Jonathan Dos Santos, I mean, I think you'd like to see both of those guys playing more in the second game, just in terms of being match fit, Kevin. So from an LA Galaxy perspective, you want to see both of those guys play some significant minutes in this game against Costa Rica for Mexico.
And by the way, if you didn't see the game on TV, that stadium, it's like a high school football stadium. It's actually a perfect COVID stadium, because you play in these big monstrosities and it's empty and it just feels like a mausoleum. This kind of feels like an AYSO game, just some old, aluminum bleachers there, and it really works for a quarantine game. Did
you see the U.S. Soccer did a feature on why they were playing those games there, and it was really this they built that site in Austria to be able to host tournaments and stuff like that. And once COVID hit, they went to the Austrian government and said, we can do this safely, let us do it. And so they've been offering it up to all the national teams, which is why there's been a whole bunch of games being played at those stadiums, which I think it's like you take advantage of the fact that, one, you have a government that will work with you, and two, you have the facilities to be able to do something quote unquote safely. So they have all the COVID testing and all the protocols and being able to separate people. Really, it's almost like Dignity Health Sports Park, in that there is a complex of fields around this place, and they're able to host and have different locker rooms and separations and all that stuff. So it was super interesting to sort of see why and how there are games being played in Austria right now between two teams that, are North American based whenever you look at, Mexico and the U.S.
And the U.S. went there in November, and I believe Mexico did as well. So this is a return trip for both of them. The one player you didn't talk about, I know you were planning on, I'll bring him up, Julian Araujo.
Yep.
Who played for the U.S. team that did not qualify for the Olympics for the third consecutive Olympic cycle. So we have some Olympic trivia for the U.S. The last goal scored by an American in a World Cup or in an Olympic Games was Sasha Kleshtin, scored in 2008. The last American to score a game-winning goal was in that same Olympics. Stuart Holden scored the only goal against Japan in the first game of group play. So there you are. U.S. have not played in the Olympics since 2008, have played in the Olympics just once since 2000. And they're not going back again. Third time in a row, they've been did not qualify, coming right on the heels of not qualifying for the World Cup. So much for Soccer Nation. We need to get back to that Soccer Nation. But Julian Araujo, he played well. He played in 2 of the 4 games. He played against the Dominican Republic and helped start the offense, I thought. Played very wide, played on the right side as a defender, and played more as a midfielder, and really helped that offense gel. He played on the left side in the first game against Costa Rica, right? I think he played a little bit against Mexico, but did not play. He came off the bench against Costa Rica, I believe.
Yeah.
He started Dominican and Mexico.
Yeah, he started for Mexico and
played 90 minutes both times. Did not play in the final game. Was one of the few players that didn't get off the bench in the final game, the deciding game against Honduras, the 2-1 game. I was surprised he didn't come on late, because he had done such a good job in his earlier appearances in sort of goosing the offense, even though he plays as a defender, getting the offense to move. Jason Christ did not use him. The U.S. wound up losing 2-1. The fact that he was one of the few players that didn't play, you were talking about, you thought it was workload. He played 2 90-minute games. The U.S. played 4 games in 11 days, so that may have been part of it. It was very warm. It was 90 degrees at kickoff. But I think Julian Araujo comes back with a big chip on his shoulder because of that. And,
Right.
and I say that from history. When he was called up for the national team for the first time, there was a friendly in Carson at Dignity Health Sports Park. He was on the team. His family came all the way up from Lompoc to see the game. He didn't play. And I talked to his mom afterwards, and she said the whole family was, including Julian, was very upset that he didn't get to play. He thought he deserved it. After that game, he came on like gangbusters for the Galaxy the first month and a half of the season. That disappointment really fueled him. I think he comes back now from the Olympic qualifier believing probably that he could have saved the team, that he might have been the spark, would have got that tying goal. Maybe the U.S. Has a different result if he plays. I really expect him to have a dynamite start to the season, and I think he winds up with the national team, not with Nations League and not in the Olympic qualifier or World Cup qualifiers, but I think he plays a vital role in the Gold Cup. I think he gets a lot of minutes in the Gold Cup this year.
Yeah, so all those people who are saying, hey, he won't be gone for the Olympics, which is a good thing because that would have been a significant chunk of time. He is going to be, we imagine, at least gone for either the Nations League World Cup qualifying or the Gold Cup. Right now, it seems like it's probably going to be Gold Cup. I don't see him sneaking onto the quote-unquote A team as it goes, but you don't know what Greg Berhalter is looking like down the bench. But it feels like he wasn't on the, and it's hard to say the A team. It's not. There was like a B or B minus team that is the U23s. It wasn't even the A U23s because the A team U23s would include a lot of the people who were on the senior national team and playing for that. But whenever you look at it, Araujo was sort of in the second starting group and not the first starting group for that Olympic qualifying tournament down in Mexico. So, for me, I think Gold Cup probably suits him pretty well, but he will still be missing this year, which is why getting O'Neal Fisher healthy and on the field is so important because that's the backup over there at right back. So I think Araujo is going to come back and play. I expected a big season out of him, but I like the amount of time that he got. I like the amount of games that he got, and so hopefully very soon, the LA Galaxy can get him back on the field and integrated into Greg Vanney's system, and he should be one of those guys who's ready to go on opening day with all of the minutes that he's put on his legs. So excited to see if that's the case.
Yeah, I definitely think he's one of those guys going to look at the stat sheet and say, hey, I played 2 full games. But what he's going to come back remembering is I didn't play the game that mattered. And I could have made, and I'm sure he believes in his heart of hearts, he could have made a difference. I think he's going to be fired up. I mean, I'm not saying that the U.S. not qualifying for the Olympics was a good thing, but I'm just saying I think the way Julian Araujo is going to accept his role is really going to help the Galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, again, for the LA Galaxy, it's fine. Maybe that means he stays with the LA Galaxy a little bit longer this season than maybe he would have. Let's get to the U.S. Open Cup because you talked about it and whether or not that would be a realistic thing. They officially announced today that the U.S. Open Cup, and in order to get into the U.S. Open Cup, you will have to qualify. And the way that you will qualify, and there's only 8 teams from MLS because it's a 16-team tournament. They canceled the opening round, so it's just going to be 16 teams. 16-team tournaments, 8 of those spots will be held by MLS. In order to do that, Kevin, it is on a points per game basis through May 3rd. And we had told you that it would be through the first 3 games, and May 3rd is through the first 3 games for most of Major League Soccer. So they will play for the 8 open spots, the LA Galaxy, after May 3rd. So it's the first 3 games, right? They go to Miami, they host New York Red Bulls, and then they go to Seattle. Those are the first 3 games.
Two of those 3 are pretty tough.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, traveling to Miami is going to be tough. Having New York Red Bulls at home is not going to be easy, and going to Seattle is a very difficult game. So, yeah, I mean, you look at that and say that more than likely, especially based upon the fact that the team looks incomplete at this particular moment, the LA Galaxy in their first 3 games aren't exactly going to be at the top of the points per game list. Having said that, all it takes is 3 wins. If you get 3 wins and you get 9 points, you're sitting on 3 points per game. 3 points per game. After this, I imagine that you're one of the top 8 teams in Major League Soccer. Maybe that's unfounded at this point, but that seems to be the case right now. So that would be what would have to happen. Now, the fun thing is, and from Ramiro, who has a great article, by the way, up on cornerofthegalaxy.com, where he's sort of looking at the success of Greg Vanney in Toronto and how the metrics sort of play that out. You should read that. It's super interesting. Don't get lost in all the numbers, because he also gives you some just generalities whenever you look at sort of the stats he's comparing. But Ramiro hit me up in the Discord and said, everybody in the league plays 3 games, with the exception of Kevin, Columbus, and RSL, who only play 2 games. So if they win both of their 2 games, they'll be sitting at 3 points per game, whereas everybody else is going to have to play 3 games, which is why MLS went to points per game on that.
Yeah, and so if, say, Columbus has a win and a draw, that's 2 points a game. The Galaxy win 2 games and lose the third, it's the same.
Yeah.
And Columbus, I think, probably when MLS saw that, they were probably very happy knowing that Columbus is the defending league champion. They would probably love to have them play in that tournament. But another thing, we talked about the potential for the Galaxy to get off to a very slow start, because they're going to be missing a ton of players that either aren't here or aren't, game fit. They still haven't signed those 5 mystery players that Greg keeps talking about. So, the U.S. qualifying for the U.S. Open Cup may not be realistic if you believe, as I do, that they're probably going to stumble a little bit out of the gate, just because they're not going to have everybody ready to go.
Well, not only that, it seems like a tall order. I should also point out, and it is important, Romero pointed this out as well, Columbus does have to play 2 CCL games before May 3rd. So they have some extra games in there that they're going to have to play. So, it doesn't exactly get them, but it's Atlanta, Columbus, Philadelphia, Portland, and Toronto each play 2 CCL games before 5-3 as well. So most of those teams outside of Columbus have to play 3 games in league before May 3rd as well. There's a whole bunch of tiebreakers, and I think MLS thinks that this is like going to be one of those things where it definitely happens in terms of tiebreakers and how many and all that. But goal differential is the first tiebreaker. Goals for per match, by the way, because all this stuff has to be done per match, Kevin, because you're not going to have an even number played by everybody. So away goals differential, all those things are sort of the tiebreakers. Goal differential, goals for, fewest disciplinary points per match, away goals differential, away goals for away. I like number 8, by the way. Coin toss. Tie of 2 clubs or drawing of lots. Tie of 3 or more. I want to see people draw straws for this thing in order to get into the U.S. Open Cup. That's where I'm going.
How do you do that? Is it going to be a virtual straw draw? Is it going to be on Zoom?
Yes, absolutely. I have 3 straws. Here they are. I'll do it for them right here from my bedroom. In order to do it, but yeah,
why not scissors, paper, rock?
I'm down for that as well.
That would be awesome.
The U.S. Open Cup this year, giant asterisk. That's fine. Some people are saying just cancel it. It doesn't matter anymore. And in a lot of ways, I think there's probably some argument to that. But they're going to play it. They want to play it, and it's just going to be a much pared down tournament. And the qualifying for the lower leagues is as crazy as you would expect as well. So it is what it is. I don't think the Galaxy are going to have to worry about it, but I wanted everybody to at least know about it. So that way they can understand what you're playing for in the first 3 games. There's a chance at going to the U.S. Open Cup. And if we're considering that the U.S. Open Cup is going to get a CONCACAF Champions League spot, Kevin, that is currently the easiest way for a U.S.-based team to win a CONCACAF Champions League, especially in a shortened tournament, a lot less games.
Well, that tournament was canceled last year for the first time in more than a century. It was played through World War I, through World War II, through pandemics and everything else, and it was canceled last year. So there will be 8 MLS teams and 8 teams from the lower divisions. So This might give a lower division team much better chance of winning the tournament, because it'd have to win fewer games.
Yes. I don't think that's going to happen.
If it catches lightning in a bottle, it's potential for that to happen.
Well, and with the crowded schedule for MLS and everybody else, that could be one of those things where they're tired, where MLS guys are tired, so they're going to play B teams and stuff like that, sort of try to whittle their way through that particular schedule of games. So anyway, U.S. Open Cup, that's where you're sort of looking at it. I think the games start later in May. May like 18th and 19th, I think is whenever that starts, somewhere around there. I don't know. I didn't read the press release. I wasn't really that concerned about it. So let's get to your weekly schedule here as well. The LA Galaxy will play on Wednesday nights. So they're playing against Bruce Arena's New England Revolution again. The game will be at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Everything broadcast on lagalaxy.com. So I'll be watching that one from home this time. I'm not going to go to the stadium on Wednesday night. So but you can watch that game. And then the LA Galaxy on Friday will head and travel to Tucson for their game on Saturday against Sporting Kansas City at 12 p.m. Pacific time. Again, that game on lagalaxy.com. And it's the first of 3 games that they'll be playing in that next week. Basically, they have Sporting Kansas City on Saturday, April 3rd. They have the Colorado Rapids on Wednesday, April 7th, and then Saturday, April 10th, sort of the big game there, the Real Salt Lake game, the last preseason game for the LA Galaxy, a 5 p.m. Pacific time kickoff Saturday, April 10th against Real Salt Lake on lagalaxy.com as well.
And you were talking about tickets. I saw something that you had posted about tickets.
Yeah, and there's still, as far as I know, there are still some tickets available to these games. If you would like to go, there is limited number, but I've been in contact with the people over at FC Tucson who are running this, and they say that the majority of the tickets are being bought by LA Galaxy fans because of the proximity and the ability to travel across the desert and be there and watch the team play. So if you do want to do that, fctucson.com, and you go to the Sun Cup, the Visit Tucson Sun Cup 2021, you can go there and buy tickets. I imagine they're still available. So you want to do that if you want to go, and you want to drive the 7.5, 8 hours to get to Tucson, which, some people like Tucson. I say avoid the city like a plague, but that's just me.
That's because you went to Arizona State.
Yes, that is correct. And I also said plague during a pandemic, which probably should get me fired, but I'll allow it.
And by the way, as you're on your way to Tucson, you'll see the Pima Airport Graveyard off to the right, just before you get to the city. Awesome place.
Very cool.
All kinds of cool historical planes there.
Very cool. They do have a lot of cool historical planes there. And back in the day when they were giving tours of the actual base there, it's a great tour. You get to ride on a bus and they drive you through some of the planes that they have in storage out there for the military and civilians as well. It's super interesting. The dry air makes it a good environment to keep airplanes from rusting. That's why there's the giant base out there. So
the Shah of Iran's former plane is there.
See? Look at all this knowledge that we're dropping at the end of a segment. This is great.
Let me give you some more. Those airplane graveyards, you being an aviation buff, you know this. Those planes are there so that if, say, Delta needs a jet or needs landing gear is the most popular item. Landing gear on those big jumbo jets, that stuff goes south really quickly. So you can call this Pima Airport and go out and get some landing gear for a 727 or whatever you have. And it's much cheaper than going to Boeing and trying to get something new.
Yes. Scavenging parts off of airplanes out there is a big business, as well as just the airplane storage as well. So, all interesting things. You can see that if you're going to Tucson. If you are, send us a note. Let us know how Tucson is, and let us know how the LA Galaxy are playing. We'll be watching on lagalaxy.com. All right, Kevin. Anything else? There was one thing quickly though, because we've already run over again, and there's no reason for us to have run over on a week or on a show where there wasn't that much to talk about.
Well, I don't get to see you that often. That's just like visiting with you.
I'm sure it is, but there are the rumors. These are bad rumors.
Oh yeah.
Sergio Aguerro, who is on our rumor tracker, by the way. I would just like to point out, everybody's like, "Oh, put Sergio Aguerro on the rumor track." He's been on it since the rumors started earlier this year about his time with Manchester City coming to a close. And that was official today that he will be leaving Manchester City after the end of the season. And everybody's like, well, clearly Sergio Aguero is coming to the LA Galaxy because the Galaxy have an open DP spot because they're not going to use it. Now, guess what? Still a 1-star rumor, and I refuse to update it right now because I don't think there's anything to that.
I have the word. I have the final word. You know that.
Yep, go ahead.
It seemed to me like an easy, like it might be something the Galaxy would consider because he's going to be out of contract, free transfer. Needing to prove as a Laton type thing, needing to prove himself after a long period of injury. So I sent Dennis DeClose a text message immediately when I heard and said, "So when does Aguero get here?" His response was, "He doesn't."
There you
go. I guess he's not coming.
Dennis was doing a little bit of this on that. That's what Dennis was doing. He was fine. He was sounding the horn on the Sergio Aguero.
And that's an un-Dennis answer. Generally, he'll say, "Well, we're looking at things," or you never know. But he's not coming. He just flat out said he's not coming.
That must mean that he's definitely coming. So I mean,
maybe.
That's I'm sure that's how most Galaxy fans are going to be taking that as well. So anyway, so there's your rumor update as well. We told you on Thursday's show about the 2 rumors in terms of Perez de Mata, the defensive midfielder, and also the French winger Kevin Cabral as well. We talked about that, and we talked about how the LA Galaxy do know of both players. They are watching both players, but that there was nothing formal, and I don't have any more updates on that. There is no update on Pavone either, and we gave you the best update on Thursday night's show. So check out Thursday night's show. And even that, there wasn't that big of an update there as well. So that's sort of where we sit. The LA Galaxy, we know they want to bring in more players. Greg Vanney hinted at getting more across the line and that they were right there, but we don't know who those players are, if they are different than the rumors that we have currently tracking. So that's where we sit with those rumors. That's where the LA Galaxy sit. Again, 2 games this week to sort of close things up. A Wednesday night game against New England Revolution, and then a game in Tucson coming up this weekend where they play Sporting Kansas City. So everything's starting to rapid fire towards the end of the season. Just a couple more games until the end of the season, Kevin, and a couple more weeks until the season officially starts in Miami. So things rapidly sort of progressing.
And then we get the home opener with fans in the stands, maybe a lot of fans.
Maybe 8,800. Who knows? We're going to have to see how that all sort of gets played out, and we'll keep you updated as it goes. All right. Being that Kevin is done talking now, and I know that because I'm going to make sure that that's the case, we'll go ahead and close everything up for tonight. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter, it's at KBaxter11. And please head on over to latimes.com where you can get all of Kevin's coverage of soccer around Southern California. So make sure you check that out. LATimes.com. If you're looking for me on Twitter, it's at JGuesman, JGUESMAN, and of course at Galaxy Podcast. cornerofthegalaxy.com. We have articles, we have videos, we have recaps, we have all sorts of fun stuff up there as the LA Galaxy get ready to ramp up for a 2021 season. All right, for Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman, and you've been listening and watching to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.